Let's create a pivotal impact. Friends in the industry. So before we get started today, I wanted to take a quick moment to highlight a piece of advice that was shared by our guest Dave today in our interview when talking about the professional sales environment and the necessity to treat people with respect. So in summary, Dave says, one day you can look across the street and see someone as a competitor, and the next you can be standing on the same side of the street as teammates working towards the same goals. So I believe this is really important advice to consider when you're navigating through the question, how do I bring the most value to my customers while operating with integrity and professionalism? I think one area a lot of competitors out there can focus on is honestly how they treat their competition, while also understanding that exactly what Dave says. One day you may be a competitor, the next day you may be a teammate. So if you're out in the streets slandering every person that's a competitor because of this or that, do you feel deep down this is the best way to bring value to your customers while also operating with integrity? In my opinion, no, it's not. So I'm Josh Hannabury, your host here at the Truck Focus podcast, and our mission here is simple. We're connecting transportation industry leaders to the industry to help create a pivotal change. And when I talk about pivotal change, I'm talking about specific solutions required to solve problems. So instead of us operating in a way that slanders competition and leaves a sour taste, the advice shared in our conversation is to keep in mind how you're operating and to be intentional with your interactions with your customers, but also with your competition. So again, this leads us to today's interview. I'm excited to speak with Dave Rosenbluth, National Sales Manager with Utility ProWare. During our conversation, Dave dives into what goes into creating successful long-term customer relationships and his views on operating with integrity. So I encourage you to learn more about Utility ProWare by visiting utilityproware.com or checking them out on all major social media platforms. The link is directly in the show notes. Before we get started today, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. So if this is the first time that you've ever joined the Truck Focus community and checked out the podcast, I really do welcome you. And to our dedicated community, thank you again for taking the time just to listen, but also to apply the advice that our industry leaders have shared. So that way you're able to create a pivotal impact in your day-to-day interactions. I'm just super grateful for that. So throughout Dave and I's conversation, I do ask that you consider, okay, what advice is Dave sharing that could help your journey, which then could help others' journeys, so that way you can continue to create a pivotal impact. Let me know in the comments, shoot me an email, whatever you got to do. But again, just let us know. Additionally, if today's impact does, again, impact you for the better, I ask that you like it and share it out. So that way your network can learn about the community here that we're growing. I'm super excited for the impact today's conversation is going to have. Let's get to it. All right, Dave, super excited for this morning to have you on the Truck Focus podcast, really learn about your journey, what you're seeing obviously in the industry from a sales perspective, a relationship building perspective, but also from Utility ProWare and just the solutions that you're bringing to industry. And yeah, I'm just really excited. So welcome.
Thanks very much, Josh. I really appreciate being here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. To start us off, why don't you give us a recap of who you are, but also highlight your experience within, I'm going to say multiple industries, because I know you got your hands in a lot of different areas.
Well, I'll summarize it. I've been in industrial and safety supply for close to 20 years with a couple or three different companies over time. Originally, the focus was more on agriculture, horticulture, kind of with a side into industrial safety because there's a lot of product that crosses over. And then I moved to where I am now with Utility Pro, which is purely safety and purely ANSI certified high visibility clothing. So I've been over 20 years in a variety of positions, procurement, sourcing, and sales. And now I'm purely the national sales manager here with Utility Pro.
That's awesome. Before we dive into our conversation, how are you seeing things from your lens today with all, obviously, of years of experience? You've had some good victories. Are you optimistic about the road ahead?
Generally, yes, only because I guess you'd say, how can I put this? There's a lot of consolidation in our world, but at some point, that consolidation leaves people with less choice, and then they tend to go back and look for something that's a little bit different. We're not we're not wanting to be consolidated. We're not looking to buy people. We're looking to grow our own business. And we believe we have a unique approach and a slightly unique product in a business that I call a Me Too business, where so many people can make the same product. So I'm generally optimistic. I'm also optimistic because here in the States, we have the infrastructure bill that passed, and the funding will start happening over the next 6, 9, and 12 months. And then the projects follow after. And for us in high visibility, those kinds of projects mean sales.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, when we had our first conversation and you were really educating me on how legislation and the implementation and integration of really does shift like consumerism, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a huge opportunity. So that's nice to know more has been passed. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. One, you realize how long it takes for an idea to get executed, or, in the old days when you're a kid, for a bill to become law, that kind of a thing. And on top of that, then for us, because, we're selling primarily to the distributor who sells to the construction company, to the contractors, et cetera. So there's a step process in there of getting the word out, and finding out who's got contracts, et cetera. So, you have to have people on the ground who know what's going on with their customers, and then are able to translate that hopefully into sales.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Before we dive into that part of our conversation, where can our listeners go if they want to maybe learn more about, obviously, Utility Pro, but also maybe purchase some gear?
Well, we're at our retail site is utilityproware.com. And our wholesale site for resellers is utility-pro-wholesale.myshopify.com. That's a little bit longer, and some folks won't remember that. But in either case, both talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, how we do it, and all our products are listed there, multiple images, videos, et cetera, and a little bit of education on ANSI and what high visibility apparel is and does.
Awesome. The links will be in the show notes as well, because I'm like, oh, that was a good link. Where do I go? Well, again, throw it in the show notes. That way it keeps it easy. So for our listeners,
great.
That's good. So in regards to visibility too, I know that you have a good relationship with Rick and Dave at BCB Live, which huge shout out to them. Awesome guys. Can you kind of touch on that a little bit? Yeah, they are.
They're great. We found each other on LinkedIn, and Rick is a safety nut when it comes to everything related to the trucking world. He's very enthusiastic, very passionate about it. You can see it and hear it in his voice whenever you talk with him, as you well know. He and Dave do a great stream every day. I check in all the time to see who he's got on. I learn a lot about your world, your business, by listening to them and to your show as well. And we've been associated with them as a sponsor of their interview segment for the last 3 months. They're good people. They do a great job. They're passionate advocates for the industry, and I think that's really good.
Agreed. Yeah, I love that word, advocate. That's really close to, I think, a lot of people that identify with the culture components of safety and less on the enforcement side. And yeah, they just do an awesome job, just really living the culture and creating that culture. And yeah, it's nice to know that you guys are working closely together too. I think that's
great. I have a lot of safety, certified safety professionals that are in my LinkedIn list, and there's always articles and pieces about culture. It's the never-ending battle. Okay, of making that part of who you are in terms of your job. We all take things for granted, whether it's in your everyday life or in your professional life. And Rick comes at it with an enthusiasm that it's hard to ignore, and it's a different angle. It's not lecturing, which I think is important, and it's common sense at the same time. So that kind of is what attracted me to it, and to those guys.
Agreed. Yeah. Completely agree. Yeah. So again, huge shout out to BCB Live, safest
Definitely.
station in the nation.
You got it.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Awesome. Okay. Okay. Well, let's pivot a little bit, but we'll focus on culture and communication. So obviously you're a sales leader, which I really respect titles. I don't think I didn't get the vibe that you put yourself on a pedestal. I like that you're a team player, but you're a leader. And obviously being in sales, covering a huge geographical area, lots of conversations. How important is effective communication between you and your team, but also your team and yourself with current customers and potential customers?
Well, I think it's everything, but okay, there's a lot of different components to it, as you well know. But I think you can have knowledge, technical knowledge of products. You can know where the customers are to show them your product and to let them know that you are knowledgeable with them on that product that they sell. But in the end, you've got to listen as much as talk. You have to listen to what the customer's saying. And, our thing is lifetime relationships, building relationships. And with building relationships, you're building trust. So I like salespeople and sales groups that tell me that they've been selling distributor XYZ for 15 years. So even if they change their lines, the distributor comes back to them for their new lines because I know Joe Blow, I trust him. I used to have this product from Sam, but I want to buy it from Joe Blow because he's always done right by me. And those are the kinds of things that we're trying to create, that we have created and always want to do more of. I want people to think of us first, even if it's a product we don't advertise we have. To me, I want somebody to call me and say, hey, do you guys have? And that means they're thinking of us straight out. And that's the relationship, and that's about our salesmen for sure. Being out there, personally making face-to-face, especially now as things are, let's say it's as close to normal as it's been in 2+ years. And in the other avenues that you reach out to people, just about all our sales groups do some kind of email blast to touch customers. If they're in a large state, you can't be everywhere every day, that type of thing. So all those parts of it are part of the whole communication process, in my view.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting that you mentioned when someone's asking, hey, do you have this? Even if it's not something that you're known for, you advertise for, because being first of thought, it's a compliment, especially in our industry. Yeah. Lots of people, lots of moving parts to think, I got to talk to Dave. Dave's my guy. And
right. Yeah. It's a real positive also because, having been a buyer, what do buyers try to do? Buyers try to get as many things they can from the least amount of suppliers as possible, make their time efficient, don't write out one-line POs for one item, try to get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items from one guy or gal as opposed to one. So the fact that we get those calls saying, you carry this, you should carry that, I wish you had this, those kinds of things, like you said, that means they're thinking of us because they had success with our product and they want to build on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, years ago when I first got into trucking, I had a banker who had, at the time, business cards. So maybe people are listening to this 5 years from, so we're 2027. If we're listening to it, they don't know what a business card is anymore, but it's this piece of paper that had business information, a name, a number, all that good stuff. And he had a whack of them. And he is just like, if you have a question, I got a guy. And to build that trust and then be able to obviously refer, if it's to a direct potential customer, maybe it's to a supplier that has a similar product and they're in a big crunch. Now they're going to start buying off of you. Like, yeah, there's a lot of value in just operating with respect and trust. So it's nice.
Yeah, I totally agree. Facilitating is part of it. That's what I call that. The movement of need along a chain to an associate, or something like that. In my mind, there's no harm, no foul there. You don't have to be territorial. It just makes sense to do that. And the customer in the end is going to remember you for sending them in the right place. If you can't do it for them, they're going to remember that.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I think that's really smart. So when you guys have been navigating this through, obviously there's different supply chain challenges. Has that culture really helped your guys' organization to continue to grow and maintain really healthy relationships with customers because you've been honest and upfront?
Well, one of the things, one of the things that we had to do from a service point of view is, we had been almost exclusively shipping out of the East Coast, but we engaged with a warehouse on the West Coast because at the time, what it basically does, if you bring stuff into the West Coast from offshore, you're saving yourself about 3 weeks as opposed to shipping it through the Panama Canal, et cetera. So to get to Jersey. So we opened up a West Coast warehouse to ship out of to alleviate some of that. Of course, the whole world thought the same thing after a while because that's just the way it went. And then the West Coast, as we all famously know, got heavily jammed with boats sitting out in the water forever. Those images just used to make us crazy. But I will say this, the customers in our world, it was happening with almost everything that they buy. They understood that. So there wasn't like this horror, like how can you not have the product kind of a thing. Everybody just had to face the fact that what used to take 3 weeks took 6. So we didn't get the blowback that you might in some other environments, number one, and I appreciate our customers for that. 2, the salesman kind of braced everybody for it. And 3, we've tried to be flexible in the sense that the conditions are changing and we expect to go back to our previous arrangement, which is 90% of it's going to come out of the East this particular fall and winter, with the remainder out of the West Coast as we whittle down that inventory. But at least it gives us the flexibility to ship something from the West Coast to somebody, let's say in Utah, as opposed to coming from Jersey and taking 7 days. So that was probably our biggest adjustment there, is understanding what, space on container ships, et cetera, those technical things, and just keeping the customers apprised. We send out weekly inventory reports with updates. We're expecting this, we think then, but, don't hold me to it because of the way things were. So we just felt, we talked about the word communication. We just thought communication was really important at that point. And so that was the big issue, is just letting folks know where we stood on every given week.
Yes. Yeah. And bad news is softer landed by someone you like and you trust versus someone who feels always trying to get the better and the upper hand on you. And why you charge me this much more this week, but not that week. So when you actually have that culture, which I really want to highlight, that's in your leadership. And that's what you're really empowering your team to be, is in people's faces now, because it's safe to do so, but also be honest, be upfront. Let's adjust. Let's be agile, because that way, when you're giving good news, awesome. But when you're giving not so good news, they still can receive it from a customer standpoint anyway, a little better.
That's a very good point. If you've already built some trust with the customer through your salesperson or yourself directly, like you said, bad news doesn't mean as much. Bad news is absorbed more gently. Transparency is a word that's been out there a lot. It seems to be the buzzword when it comes to communication, and it might be a little overused, but there's truth in it. It makes a difference, and so that's what we're trying to do. Just keep people updated with the information so they can make their best decisions. And sometimes we may lose because of that in terms of an order or a sale, but I'd rather that than hold information and then we lose bigger later.
Absolutely. Yeah, the sphere of influence is really important. And I think, so transparency is a buzzword, but I don't know who sings the song, but it says too much of a good thing is still a good thing. Mm-hmm. Where if you want to be transparent and vulnerable and you lose a sale, but you lose a battle, you win the war. Okay, like that's a really good thing, especially when you want to operate with integrity, you have character, you have your own reputation. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree with that position. I think that's the way we try to position ourselves.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really respect that. And again, it just goes right to the point where, like, literally the Truck Focus podcast is introducing industry leaders like yourself that I can proudly say, hey, you got to go talk to so-and-so. You guys got to connect. And again, just through our conversation, you're bringing out a lot of value, which I appreciate.
No, thanks.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. So in the beginning, you mentioned some new legislation. It takes time, obviously. How Well, can you reiterate this new legislation that just changed, and how do you see that shifting your workplace or marketplace?
Well, in terms of here in the States, the infrastructure bill is probably the most recent thing in terms of what it'll do for work. It's going to put a lot of people to work on the roads, bridges, tunnels, railway, et cetera. So that means all kinds of companies are going to have contracts that might last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, because these projects can be enormous, whether it's a bridge or what have you. And, those kinds of things will have impact in that our customers, the distributors, suppliers who have the contacts with those companies, they're going to be aligning themselves with these folks who get contracts. They stay close to them. They've been regular customers of that distributor, et cetera. There's, obviously going to be a lot of money floating around in regards to all that. There'll be a lot of business for a whole lot of us in the high-vis world. That obviously is a good thing. We talked about it before in conversation. Rules are good in the safety world. Rules mean you have to. And in my case, I have an item that people have to wear. It's a have to. It's not a maybe. It's a have to. It's really up to our salespeople to stay close enough to their distributors and their field sales force, et cetera, just to stay close to the news and be available to say, well, what are you going to need? And let's go down the list and let's see what we can do for you. And, give us some idea how far you're projecting this out, all the other nitty gritty details so you can make sure you got the goods for as long as they're going to need them.
That's right. Yeah. No, and I think that really ties to the strength of what we were just talking about before: relationships, trust, communication, and especially when all of a sudden there's an economic boom and people need, it's law. It's not maybe today I'll wear shoestrings. Yeah. It's like, no, you have to, or you're not going to work. So
right. Yeah. I mean, here in the state, here OSHA will shut down a work site, job site. If someone's missing something, it'll shut down the site. They won't kick the guy off the site. They'll shut it down. So that hovers over a lot of this stuff, from a compliance point of view. So it is. It goes back to that one word relationship in the end.
Agreed. So with obviously more jobs for years, because some of these contracts fed for a couple of years, how are you guys, like obviously Utility Pro, working with your suppliers to help with the diverse work culture? If it's different cultures in general, if it's more women coming in the industry, which is awesome, how are you guys helping in that space?
Well, what we've done, as we talked about, we have developed a series of pieces for women. Not 1 or 2 like some of my competitors have, but we have 6 with 2 more coming online this fall. We'll have 8 pieces and have others on the drawing board for women. Women have grown in traditionally male fields, as you know, in the trucking world. Women are gaining in leaps and bounds in that world alone. And in the construction field, it's a big deal too. Women who need PPE as a whole, whether it's construction, trucking, public safety, refuse pickup, whatever, it comes to 8.5 million women. That's a big number. Okay. It's only, I think it's like 13% of the workforce, the total workforce in those fields, but that's 8.5 million people. That is a significant marketplace that has to be treated with with the same equitable approach that we've treated the field and assumed for males forever. So we have, like I said, these 6 pieces. They're designed for women. They're cut to fit a variety of women's shapes. We all know women are shaped different than men, thankfully. And we all know that means different sizing requirements. It is very unsafe to be wearing high-vis on a job site that doesn't fit you properly. It is unsafe even for a trucker to do it if they have an oversized vest on, given just my images of a truck cab with the gear shift being so big on so many of these rigs. the vest could get caught up or a jacket could get caught up and you cause an accident. It's common sense. It's got to fit you right. And our belief is that if you forget you're wearing it, that means it fits you right. You know, we're in everyday clothes. We're not thinking about our clothes. We're not going like this or that right now, right? Because we forgot we have it on because it's comfortable. You want that same attitude about your work clothing, you know? And so that's our approach. We got started with it because women from Harley Davidson who worked on an assembly line explained just that to us, that as the bikes came by on the line, they were getting caught up in the equipment because they're wearing male garments. So that sent our light bulb off. And we've been doing that ever since. Got to be a good 6 or 7 years now that we've had product. And now, you know, we're trying to let more people know about it through the graces of people like yourself, BCB Live and others, our own marketing efforts, et cetera, to let women know in these previously male-dominated industries that there is a place where you can go get this, okay, and where you can find what you want to wear. We've also done some of that for males in the fact that we've added smalls. There are many industries, as you know. I'll give landscaping as a great example. Landscaping employs a significantly large amount of Hispanic folks, and many of them are on the smaller side. So they end up wearing a lot of male smalls and male mediums. So on some of our styles, we've added smalls to accommodate that, that difference in size. And so, you know, you have to be aware of some trends that go on over time, you know. And on the flip side of that, we also have talls in many of our sizes. So you might have a trucker who he sits in a rig all day, but he's 6'7", you know. He or she doesn't want to wear a waist length jacket in the winter because they're taller and they're never long enough. So we have talls that, you know, add that couple or 3 inches at the bottom, whatever that number is, so that when you know, the big thing is you raise your arms, the thing comes up over your gut. You know, when you're a tall person, I'm 6'3", I'm conscious of that. Yeah. So we're kind of trying to, excuse me, do that on both sides of the size spectrum a little bit.
Yeah. Very smart. The fact when you said you don't even realize you're wearing it, I think that's also a confidence component. There's a frustration component that you're helping people overcome. There's a concentration, and you're not constantly turning and tugging before you dig or before you adjust the light bulb because you're afraid that your stomach's going to show. So that's really thought out. And I think that, again, just speaks volumes to how you guys value people as a company, because a lot of people, one size fits all, you don't like it. I don't know, using an elastic band, like I've seen, I don't know how many times, trying to make something tight, or you're ripping the bottoms to try and make it looser. And it's like, no, you don't need to do that. So I admire that for sure.
Yeah. You know, I think part of that, just the company's experience had been more on before we started this division, which I'll call the business to business sales division. But before we started it, the company's background was all in selling to, you know, large retail, you know, making private label stuff, like we did it for Sears for a long time, you know, and other companies. So, you know, think of yourself as a shopper. You have a certain expectation when you go in and you look at clothing on a rack. It is a slightly different expectation than the guy who drives the truck, who goes into the truck stop, who looks at a vest or a T-shirt or a jacket there. But we're bringing some of that same consumer sensibility and consumer expectation to a work piece. And the thing I said before about forgetting that you're wearing it, I mean, that to me is everything, okay? Because when you're there, it's like you said, you know, your mind's on your job and not on your clothing.
Yes.
And which is where it should be, you know. Yeah. People do hard enough jobs in these fields that we're talking about, you know. In the trucking world, people are on the road for hours upon hours, hauling big, you know, heavy loads. They got to be able to concentrate and not worry about it. You know, they're driving in the winter. They might wear our bib overall, okay, and they can unsnap that and put it down. They might do something like that, and they're not thinking about, man, it's, you know, I got to adjust this and that and the other. No, you just drive, you know, do your job, and you don't got to worry about it.
Correct. Yeah. No, I think that's really smart. And again, it just speaks to how you, as an organization, value people, because there's, as we know, and I don't want to insult any competitor by any means, but there's a lot of companies out there that don't go that far in their thought process. They just think Excel is Excel, put it on the shelf. So it's good to see.
Well, the product has become a bit of a commodity, especially portions of it. Vests to me are like tissue paper, t-shirts are kind of like that too. I mean, any of us can go to Walmart today and buy a Gildan, plain cotton t-shirt for like next to no money. And, you buy 6 or 7 of them, and 7 months later, you've ratted them all out. You go buy 6 or 7 more, and you don't think twice about it. I mean, it's very disposable. So you bring that sensibility, that disposability there onto the work site thing. And so what we've tried to do is create something with a little bit more value, that people appreciate that value. And like I said, they don't think about it when they're wearing it.
Nice. Good. Yeah. No, I think that's really powerful. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate just how open you are too, because again, there's no trade secrets. Like, we're not digging for that. It's more so just, let's really create an impact in people and say, hey, you can be comfortable and you can be safe. So I like that for sure.
Yeah. It's kind of an evolutionary process. I mean, high visibility has been around for quite a while, but it didn't become such a big deal until, I'll say about 10 or 12 or 14 years ago. And at that point, so many more people were mandated to have to wear it. So once that happens and people start wearing, then they start thinking, they go, if you did this or did that, it would be a lot better. And then you have the reaction to that, and you get the back and forth, and you start to have the communication between the user and the maker, and the product look and function evolves.
Yeah.
Like in any other business, you put a wrench in a guy or gal's hand and they say, this is great, but, then you fix that and you move on.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's smart. And I just love progression. That's one of the things I love most about industries collectively, is like, you can really adapt to the user said, this is great, but just like, okay, so you make some tweaks, then that is great, but you can always be progressive just in your approach. And really, that, like, again, we can go in lots of different directions with that exact component, because retention right now is one of the hottest topics in most industries. How do you keep your people? How do you get new people in recruiting? And I think it's being progressive in solutions, and obviously aligning yourself with professionals like yourself and your team and their suppliers. So that way, it's just like, no, we don't worry about that here. We got you covered. So
right.
I think it's powerful.
Yeah. It's a good point. It's got to be embedded in how you go about business. And if you're not nimble and you're not agile, you're not going to be a long-term business. I think that's a maxim that probably, business admin students in college probably hear very early on, that's just, if you're not nimble, if you're not flexible, you won't be around long.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's a good segue, because I really wanted to talk, because you're really, something I admire about you, Dave, is from right away, I felt like we could have a good conversation. So you're relatable. You obviously know how to get to different people's levels and stuff, which I think is important. So for different salespeople or different business people, say they're in university right now, or maybe they're professional drivers trying to get better with their own customer service, can you kind of shed some light on just different ways that people can, I guess, or approaches that they can take to just strengthen their relationships with new customers or just new people that they're meeting that you're using?
I think a couple of things. One thing that I did, or I've learned over time, is that nobody has all the answers. Okay, that you need to hear other perspectives from, people in your own field, like fields, even different fields, especially when it comes to sales. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat, as it were, and so you can that's where the whole networking thing and being accessible to your peers and to people above your grade and below your grade in your industry and around it for perspectives. Sometimes all you got to do is hear something come out of someone else's mouth and it clicks in your head. So I think the networking thing and having relationships with others in the business is a very important thing. I know in the end that some of them are your competitors, but by the same token, especially in the sales world, you you end up on opposite sides of the street and then on the same side of the street within a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year period. The roles move around. And so one thing is to have those relationships where you can have professional discussions. 2, there's associations, obviously, whether it's particular to the industries you sell into, that help too. They give you more insight into the thinking of the customer. You know, you got to understand them. You may think you know it all, but their point of view matters too, how they approach their business. So there's associations that are very valuable on a personal, professional level, and there's professional associations to be involved in, to learn from. You know, all of those things build your knowledge, your base knowledge, and your ability to be flexible when dealing with any one individual. You know, you don't like to categorize people, but you know, a customer could be like I'm a yes, no person. You know what I mean? There's no gray. And then there's the other guy or gal who's way more gray than black or white. Well, you learn how to deal with those things. A yes, no person is, here's what I got. Do you like it? No. Okay, here, look at this. You like it? Yes. But then there's other people where it's, well, I sort of like that. And then you hear what it is they like or don't like, and you move on from there to figure out how this could work. So I always look at it more about increasing your knowledge base and increasing your understanding of ways to communicate besides just speaking to somebody, you know, whether it's the written word even, you know, and other marketing techniques. And as we all know in this world today, when you open your mailbox in the morning, you know, thank God for junk files because of how much stuff goes in your junk file. You know, there's so much white noise around you, you know? So you just have to be judicious, I think, with how you go about reaching people, you know, in that regard.
Agreed.
So I was a little bit all over the place with that, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that for sure. And it's nice. So I call them passion moments and areas within a conversation people really care about. And I can tell leadership, impact, influence are areas that you just really like, it gets you jacked. So I'm glad you ran with it. Thank you. It's good. It's good. It's actually good timing too, because as we do end, one of my staple questions talks about legacy and impact and being intentional with relationships. And I can tell already, just again, through our conversations, that this is close to you, but how do you view, or how, from an important Richter scale, from 1 to 10 kind of thing, can you summarize just how important it is to create a positive impact on those that you lead so that way they can go do the same? And are you always conscious of that? Like, is that the space that you really thrive in?
You know, because we deal with manufacturers, reps who carry multiple lines. They're not, let's say, company employees. It's a little bit different in that regard. Each one of those folks, you know, in each of the rep groups, they carry their own sets of motivations. I mean, on a personal level, someday when I'm not doing this anymore, you know, if I was able to listen in, I'd want somebody to say, yeah, that Dave Rosenbluth, I liked him. He was a good, solid guy. You know, that on a personal level, that's enough, you know. And I look at that the same way outside in personal life, not business. I do want people to always think of Utility Pro in a positive fashion, okay? And so on some level, I'm one of the faces of the company. So I guess in terms of legacy, those are the things I'd want to see. I wouldn't say less concerned, but it's not as big an emphasis with the salespeople because they're representing so many lines. How the salespeople conduct themselves is more important to me, okay? And if they're conducting themselves in a highly ethical, upfront, professional manner, then they're people that I'm interested in talking to. Anybody who is less than that, they're not going to be Utility Pro people. So that's that's kind of my approach.
Awesome. Huge. Yeah. Really aligned. I really admire that. Thank you for saying that. That's really powerful.
Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that, man. And I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. As I've said a couple of times now, I just really value your leadership. And again, as we get to know each other more, I'm like, yeah, go with that, run with that. And I really admire how you can really see the landscape, you can see the opportunities, and you can speak to those opportunities really well. So as we do end, can you just give our listeners a recap again where they should go to learn more about Utility Pro?
Well, we're at utilityproware.com. We have a complete selection there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Dave Rosenbluth. The company's on LinkedIn, Utility ProWare, and we're on Instagram as well at Utility Pro Workwear. We're constantly looking for real-world endorsements of our product that we can post on those sites, post videos, images of people wearing our apparel. So I encourage Utility Pro lovers out there to reach out to us for those things.
Awesome. Okay, and I'll make sure I put that call to action in our notes too, because that's really good to know. Again, real life people in the workforce, forgetting that they're wearing it, are great representation. So that's awesome.
Yeah, very, very much so. We want to make that direct connection with people.
Okay, no, that's awesome. So again, to our listeners, links are in the show notes. And if you are currently, or you're like, hey, I'm going to start buying this gear, make sure that, you share those pictures. So that's awesome. Awesome.
Great.
Okay. Well, Dave, thank you again. I really do appreciate the fact that you took the time to come on, and I just admire your leadership, and I'm excited to see this as our journey progresses too. And this was awesome. Thank you.
Josh, thanks so much. It's great talking with you. You make it real easy. I really enjoy what you do. Your passion for the world of trucking, and I look forward to a long association.
Awesome, man. Thank you. That really means a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, man. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Dave, my friend, thank you again for taking the time joining me on the Truck Focus podcast, but also for the mission that you and your team are on to help people operate safely, but also for influencing others to operate with integrity. I think that's incredible. So as I reflect on our conversation today, Dave, I really do appreciate the fact that Utility ProWare has taken charge by being mindful of what their customers go through, but also the mentality, forget that you're even wearing it, is considered a huge asset when you recognize just if you're wearing the wrong size personal protective gear and just how dangerous that could be. So really well done. Additionally, Dave, I really do appreciate your approach to leadership and operating with integrity. I believe it's crucial, the advice that you shared, Dave, when we're talking about the side of the street, to really keep that in mind when we're focused also not just serving your customers, but also on what our competitors are doing and who they are as people. So I encourage you to learn more about Utility ProWare by visiting utilityproware.com or checking them out on all major social media platforms. The links are directly in the show notes. So before we end today, I did want to take a moment again to say thank you. So again, if this is the first time you've checked out the Truck Focus podcast, I really do welcome you to our community. And again, a huge shout out to our existing community. Just super grateful for your dedication and taking the time to listen, but also applying the different pieces of advice that we shared, like what Dave shared today. It just really does mean a lot. So at the beginning of our conversation, I put out a challenge. I said, hey, if Dave says something that really does spark your interest, that makes you think, hey, I can do this or I can do this and create a pivotal impact in the lives of others, to let me know. Now's the time. So let me know. Send me a message, send me an email. Of course, all contact details are in the show notes. So that way I can just be informed of what advice was shared that you're like, yes, I can apply this now. So again, thank you so much. I do ask again that you like this episode, share it out, but also subscribe to the channel that you're listening to. So that way you're notified of all upcoming content. As always, let's create a pivotal impact.